with Dr. Jiří Dynda. Jiří is, I dare say, one of the most prominent young researchers on pre-Christian religions of the Slavs, and at the same time he works on the theory and methodology of religious studies. And of course, he is affiliated to the Institute of Slavonic Studies of the Czech Academy of Sciences. And the title of the presentation is going to be Simulacra Semiotics, Visual Representation of Slavic Deities in the Hagiographies of Otto of Bamberg. So we will go on with.
Thank you very much. Good morning once again. I will certainly circle back to several subjects we already touched upon here, and I will continue with our possibilities of reading and understanding the sources that originated in the missionary actions of Otto of Bamberg. And I will, doing it on its own. I will focus on visual representations of Slavic deities, which we have for which we have a wealth of information from variety of medieval Christian authors. These depictions of gods found as sculptures, reliefs, woodcuts, and fabric military banners depicting the gods are commonly referred to by these terms, such as simulacrum or statum, and so on, basically meaning the same thing, some kind of effigy or likeness or a statue. A key passage for us in this regard is comes from Helmold of Bosau in his chronicle. He says that Slavs have different forms of idolatry because they do not agree in the same superstitious custom, and some exhibit in their temples the effigies of elaborate forms, as the idol of Plan, called Podaga, while other gods dwell in forests or groves, such as Prove, the god of Oldenburg, and are not clearly represented. Many gods are carved with 2 or 3 or even more heads, and they do not deny that among multifarious representation of the gods to whom they attribute fields and forests, sorrows and joys, there is one God in heaven. What stands out here is the emphasis on the diversity of Slavic paganism and its representation in material form. Helmold suggests that the material and artistic expression or conception of Slavic deities was not necessary condition for their representation in the world. He says that it could be statues, gods that are not clearly represented, or gods that are carved with 2 or 3 or even more heads, which we know from many sources and from archaeological evidence as well, as here in the first example, the twin statue from Fisherin cell, or as we know from Kouřem idol found in Bohemia just recently, and we will hear about this finding tomorrow from Nadia Profantova, which was recently confirmed to be really from the 8th and to 9th centuries. In this paper, and again, all this backdrop, I want to focus on the biographers of Otto of Bamberg as my pool of data, and how they can help us to understand the Slavic conception of divinity. Unlike Helmold, Otto was a missionary and diplomat. He Christianized pagans in diplomatic way. And to quickly recap the known well facts, his first mission began in 1124, and he converted mainly the central cities or towns of the Pomeranian gens, which were Szczecin and Wolin. And in 1128, after he learned that several open pagan revolts happened actually in Pomerania, he returned to Szczecin, and despite the opposition of pagan priests who were against the new religion, he convinced residents to turn to Christianity. All those 3 vitae present, comparably with the other sources, quite a neutral description of pagan religion. Only the pagan priests are usually depicted negatively as the main antagonists, but the paganism as such is not so negatively depicted, as far as I can tell. In contrast, Otto is portrayed as an understanding missionary who offers non-violent alternative religious system, tries to explain the flaws of the paganism and so on. And this, of course, pertains to the genre we are dealing here with, which is basically the hagiography. We can go into the text and illustrate this through the description of temples in Szczecin, for example. From the four, you know all that very well. One temple was principal, dedicated to supreme god Triglav, who was supposed to be the most important god of the pagans, who was supposed to have 3 heads. I will leave aside all the subject of interpretation of Triglav, 3 heads and covered face and so on. We know for certain that the depiction of Triglav was anthropomorphic, figurative, and polycephalic. And what is remarkable at this point, really, is that we do not see a definitive demonological or idolatrous interpretation of paganism, which are the most common ways to describe Slavic deities for Christian authors. When we encounter these interpretive strategies, actually, in Otto's Vitae, they appear simultaneously. For instance, during the course of the first mission, when it was clear that the Pomeranians had accepted the terms and agreed to Christianization, Otto addressed the assembly and delivered the speech, where he mixes both of these discourses, so to say, right? You have to immediately renounce these imposters, your deaf and dumb gods, your statues, which is a quotation from Psalms, and the unclean spirits that reside in them. Destroy the temples, crush the idols, for unless you cast away all the other gods, he will not be able to be favorable to you, for he rejects and regards as dishonorable alliances with other gods, against some kind of demonology, and his temple has nothing to do with the idols, again, biblical reminiscence. I know that you are afraid of the demons, the inhabitants of your temples and statues, and because of this you dare not destroy them. The statues are described as deaf and dumb, inanimate, lifeless objects, basically, which is fully in the line of biblical criticism of idolatry. Yet in the same breath and in the same sentence, Otto adds that unclean spirits, in mundi spiriti, or demons which lead people astray, inhabit these statues. And these are not just some anonymous minions of devil, but are very specific inhabitants of the sanctuaries and statues. Similarly, in Legenda Christiani, there is also mention of demons dwelling in idols. And what is happening here, I think, is a deliberate and thoughtful blending of both discursive strategies that were meant to criticize paganism, which is demonological and idolatrous. And they both together cleverly integrate the cultic system of Slavic paganism into cosmology of Christianity, because they also allow Otto to take Slavic paganism seriously, at which point he can definitively criticize and demean the deities. Because the statements that the idols are merely deaf and dumb wooden statues are basically well-considered illocutionary acts, essentially performative and magical statements intended to diminish and neutralize the power of Christian deities. But in the performative public destruction of these statues, this illocutionary act of declaring their powerlessness is also demonstrated in practice. It's somewhat paradoxical because the ritual, the performance of destroying the statues has a dual purpose: to show that pagans and their deities are defenseless, how they can help you if they cannot help themselves, and to display the triumph of Christians over paganism, a triumph over those deities. However, you cannot truly boast over a triumph. You cannot boast of a triumph over paganism if you destroy something that has no power, really. So you have to have this dynamics there. Destroying defenseless statues is somewhat embarrassing, and you have to have these demons or some antagonist in there. some demons dwelling in the statue, some demons dwelling in the sanctuary. This is how generative AI imagines how the demon is dwelling in the sanctuary, like this, or weird shadow, or a weird roommate who is just lurking behind the doors. But I like this because it has precedents in Radziwill Chronicle, where there are demons also appearing, like pulling the strings of the pagan cult, so on. Yet this Christian conception of pagan statues, which somewhat obscures the Slavic emic perception of divinity. And to have closer understanding of this perception, we must consider it from a different angle. And I think that the situation with the representation of the numinous that are not anthropomorphic and iconic are quite illustrative of this problem. Based on Peirce's theory of semiotics and his division of signs into three categories based on how they relate to what they signify, I will go through a few examples and then I will conclude. Just to quickly recap Peirce's semiotics, he said that there are three kinds of signs or signifiers: icon, which is signifier based on physical resemblance, like that this is a cat, or this signifies a cat. Index is a signifier based on relation to what is being represented, which is, in this case, this imprint of cat's paw signifies that there was a cat, or there has been a cat, as well as, for example, smoke on the horizon signifies as an index that there is a fire. And symbol is signifier based on totally culturally learned convention and tradition. This is a cat in Chinese. As I trust my sources, I don't know really, but it should be. And similarly, it can be shown on this signs you know very well, based on similarity, based on some kind of relation to what is being represented, and to totally arbitrarily symbols signify sex. So, and what is also important, that icon is sort of identical to principle of metaphor, principle of likeness in literature, and index is basically principle behind metonymic descriptions, principle of some kind of relatedness, like the table number 6 is ordering this, and this table is not ordering anything. It's the people who are sitting at the table and related to the table. And I'm speaking about this, that because when we have iconic representations of Slavic deities, it's a clear case. They are all anthropomorphic, figurative in a sense, statues of gods representing a man or men with 3 heads. And these types of signs do not attempt. What is more interesting is when these signs do not attempt to replicate the physical appearance of what they represent, but instead point to the essence or presence of the divine through more abstract or maybe associative means. And I'm going to show examples in a minute. Starting from the more problematic, from the bottom up, let's examine the absolutely iconic, non-figurative representations, as Helmold was speaking about, but in the biographies of Bishop Otto. Here, for instance, we can classify the veneration of the sacred tree in Antwell in Szczecin, right? No need to expand on that. We can see that the deity was probably, or at least in the eye of the authors of the biographies, the deity was represented through the reverence of natural phenomena. Right, again, deity is considered to dwell inside the tree. Tree is consecrated to the idol. People visit it as for the reason of religion, and so on and so on. So the specific deity residing in this tree is not known for certain, but it might have been related to the Triglav, possibly, albeit on a symbolic level that is not immediately obvious to us today. Another interesting non-figurative depiction of divinity was the sacred spear of Volin. allegedly dedicated to the legendary founder of the city, Julius Caesar. It was preserved, this spear, as thrust into an impressively large pillar. And the pillar and the spear, again, do not directly represent a deity, but they refer to divinity in some sort of indirect manner, serving as either index or symbol. It might be a classic divine attribute, divine weapon, allusion to Triglav prophetic spear that the horse was crossing over, and so on. And third, we have numerous indications that divinity in the Pomeranian conception did not need to be clearly visible at all. And this circles back again to the three theme, because a famous story by Ebbo tells that during the first destruction of temples, the pagan priests of Szczecin managed to save Triglav's golden statue and transported it outside the fort. And statue was wrapped in a cloth, hidden within the trunk of a hollow tree, and likely placed within some makeshift temporary sanctuary of some sorts. No one was given the opportunity to see the statue, no, let alone touch it, unquote. We can see that the cult of Triglav then could continue in a secret to some extent. Offerings could be made without worshipper needing to see the deity. And the method of placing the statue is also very interesting, because it's the small statue hidden in a tree with his face covered against, associated with Triglav's eyes and mouth covered in the Volhynian temple. And the whole idea of some metal thrust or hidden inside the wood is reminiscent of the Volyn spear, also hidden in the column. So this may be coincidental, of course, but I believe all these elements interlock very interestingly. And we can also see that this iconic figurative statue is made indivisible twice, right? The cloth and the tree function more as a symbolic references to other forms of Triglav's cult. And another indexical representation related to Triglav, both in Szczecin, was his black horse dedicated to him. We know that it was used for divination and crossing the spears, divining the outcome of battles to come. But it was not, although Herbord once says that it was your living deity of divination, referring to the horse, we can see that it's not representing a deity straightforwardly. More, what's important here is the saddle that represents the deity, because the horse has to be saddled before the ritual. So the horse and saddle are linked to Triglav by a metonymy. The saddle on the back of the horse points metonymically to the deity's presence and its participation of the divination. So God, again, is seen only through his indices, the saddle and the horse. This approach to indexical representation of the numinous can be further illustrated by two stories from Otto's biographies, which I'll mention here as a final example and then conclude. They do not concern Triglav, but Volgastian deity called Gerovitus, maybe Jarovit, not really important right now, but we already heard about this story. A pagan priest, local priest from the temple, learned about the missionaries coming, and he decided to take a vestment or a robe of the deity from the temple. He disguised himself as a deity, and he terrified a passing villager and told him that he's the god and that they must kill the missionaries, which happened eventually because a few days later Otto's missionaries arrived in town, and they had nothing better than to sightsee the town. So they wanted to see the pagan temple, but they crossed angry crowd of locals who were trying to kill them, basically, because you don't want missionaries just sightseeing your temples. So the missionaries escaped, except for a monk called Dietrich, who managed to hide into the sanctuary, inside the temple, and he found a huge gilded shield, allegedly dedicated to Gerovit, their god of war, or Gerovit, who is in Latin called Mars. And Dietrich basically puts on the shield on his arm, and armed with it, he emerges from the temple, and the people of Wolgast, in fear, believe him to be the god himself, the incarnation of the deity, and they fall to the ground in terror and scatter, gasping and sighing, giving the cleric the opportunity to escape and toss away the shield. Both stories appear consecutively in both vitae as episodes, and they were meant, undoubtedly, to illustrate the same principle. The Slavs are, according to these sources, naive, and they can be deceived by someone carrying a distinctive symbol of their god, a garment or a shield, and consider him to be the apparition of the god himself. Right? In the case of the pagan priest, the principle is used against the missionaries to incite the mob against them, and conversely, Dietrich's story is reversal of this, where the principle is exploited in favor of the missionary by giving him the opportunity to escape. In both cases, however, it is a literary depiction of the same pagan delusion. Yet, on deeper level, both themes also highlight the principle of metonymic presence of the deity, as I was talking about it, which is embodied by the indices of the deity, perhaps similarly as the Triglav saddle functioned as during the divination ritual. And now, conclusion, very quickly. We saw a range of visual representation of Slavic numinous power, anthropomorphic, iconic statues that are soulless objects full of demons, symbolic representations like trees or pillars, and indexical representations that evoke the presence of divinity in a metonymy, in an indexical manner, such as horse, saddle, spear, or shield. This material and tangible nature of Pomeranian divine iconography is important, I think. The gods are present in the statues themselves. They were only reclassified as demons, and they are there for Bishop Otto and his Hagiographers, and they are there, of course, for the Pomeranian themselves, because they fear of their retribution if they destroy them. They can be also present, of course, invisibly through their attributes. And so the missionaries undoubtedly took advantage of the fundamental belief in the material essence of these deities, particularly the significance of statues. And to some extent, the missionaries tactically accepted the Slavic pre-dualistic view, which did not strictly distinguish between matter and spirit. So the statue and deity was considered to be identical. The deities were immanent in the statues, not transcendent. And Otto himself must have realized that the physical presence of the idols was the cause of pagan revolts. Therefore, during the second mission, he destroyed all of them. So this dual approach, idolatry and demonology, probably reflects a nuanced missionary tactic. Devalue the physical idol while subtly acknowledging their powerful symbolic and emotional impact on the pagans. And thank you for your attention. And
thank you very much, Jiří, for your splendid presentation. I found it very fresh, very modern, considering that you passed from the classical, search of origins of the deities to the morphology. That is extremely interesting. To a semiotic lecture of the text. And I think that it could be done with other sources, ancient sources as well, and then being compared. There is the results of the morphological results to be compared. We will pass right away to the two questions. Many questions. Wait, we will start because it's the first hand that I saw. Or maybe, okay, you can start. It was the first.
Okay, thank you so much. So when it comes to the cat versus God, we know how cat looks like, so we can be sure that something is its icon. but we don't know how a god looks like. So do we know what actually, which of the signs is an icon and which is index? Because I think that why I'm asking this is because I'm a little bit wary of taking gods as we now, and also as the Christians very often, and maybe even some of the pagans saw them as some kind of Marvel superheroes in human form. Maybe that's not what gods were. That they were that they, they used various representations, some iconic, some non-iconic, but they were all pointing to something that was not human form in its nature. It was some kind of bundle of meanings that connect nature and human experience and I don't know what animals and stuff like that. So the issue is, do we, isn't there behind it this image of God as this basically Superman, where we can say that it's something is icon, something is index?
Yeah, I think we have pretty some clues how the cat looked, because, for example, in case of Triglav, it was this anthropomorphic statue with 3 heads. And we have description of his faces covered with golden bands and so on. So it was anthropomorphic, iconic representation of a man with certainly unusual attributes, such as 3 heads or polycephaly, which is probably coming from the henotheistic principle of Polabian deities in general. But what I was trying to say that it was not the only possibility to depict a deity in this anthropomorphic form, but that it could be, and that these occasions are actually much more often and much more important, that the deity was present in some symbolic or different way or indexical way. And the indexical way was quite important. And of course, when the priest was playing as a deity, he was also anthropomorphic. So what it took, there was, we don't know about it much, but there was a garment of a deity in the temple, and he just took it and he cosplayed the deity. So.
Okay, we will move to the next question. Because not many questions or not too many.
And so I'll try to be brief, but what fascinated me is when you mentioned the author, the hagiographer, when he mentioned the evil spirits residing inside the icons. If we could, the question is basically if we could consider this a recognition of paganism in a sense. For example, the Volga Mari, they integrated, as far as I know, I think it was Saint Nicholas in their pagan, quote unquote, pagan religion, with a, let's say, friendly integration. In this case, it's a unfriendly integration because ontologically they recognize that there exists some spirits, that the pagans, the Slavic pagans, were onto something. They which is characteristic of Christianity, that they integrated, they recognize their reality, but in an unfriendly way. Whereas I think even some Slavic populations integrated Christian entities, saints, etc., in a friendly manner inside. But Christianity was very exclusive, but not really exclusive because they. So anyway, this is the idea that they were somehow crypto-pagans. They recognized that these spirits had some metaphysical reality, but that they were evil. They were like enemies.
Yeah, I agree. I think you summarized it pretty neatly, that they just took the idea of pagan deities, and the Christian missionaries made it part of their own cosmology, of their own worldview, by which they neutralized it. It was no longer some kind of alien threat from behind the border, but it was the demons we know for a long time, the same demons still. So we know how to deal with them, and that gives us some kind of comfort, and they can be dealt effectively with.
Last question.
All right, it will be more perhaps the remark, and thank you, Jiří, very much for the wonderful paper, which make me as an archaeologist really unhappy, because it has, of course, very, very tragic consequences for the identifying the remains of materiality of pagan worships for us and archaeologists, because in fact we don't know what we are looking for, and just take into account what is mentioned in written sources, that the places of worship have a form as an oak tree or fenced area or the grove, or the wood or something like that, which is not specific and doesn't make any specific archaeological traces. And of course, the long discussion in archaeology, what is the object of pagan worship and what is not, So, I would be very skeptical. I think we are completely right that it could have very unspecific symbolic representations, which are not readable for us, from semiotic point of view. So, yeah. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for making me sad, you mean.
Last question. Well, yeah, okay.
Thanks a lot. And firstly, at Watson, well, agree. Archaeology of pagan religion is a horribly difficult knowledge and very risky and true. Well, Jiří, thanks a lot for inspiring lecture, and thanks a lot for organizing the conference once again. Going to your presentation, I'm not willing to speak about methodology and semiotic or historical. I'm hoping I'm still too young to speak about methodology and historiography, but you touched two extremely important problems, inspiring. First is the question of foyer in sanctuaries. On your pictures, I suppose it is some bit new pagan stuff. Beautiful.
It was completely AI. So
AI
doesn't. It's not really clever.
Yeah. And what we had there, apart the fact that we don't have those bas-reliefs inside temples, what should be is the foyer. You have some candles and other things like that. And except for Eastern Slavs. I think here we're touching quite important problem. I really want to have some foyer, some fireplaces, something like that by Western Slavs. We have a plenty of good description, and this element is lacking. Why? Going to Baltic religion, we have a plenty of that. So that's one problem you touch on your pictures, thanks to these created pictures, what is fantastic, and brings something for us. Another point, you started to show some of those shows, performances in pagan religion. Of course, this missionary activities, it was also include a lot of elements of performance. And there is something, but I should write a text for Periganal for his first script. And I was thinking about performance in pagan religion, but sometimes in some special purpose for Christians to mislead them sometimes. And sometimes what we have in Radogosht, this oracle, I suppose it was done because of alliance to Henry II, and the German and the boys were present. So they do some performance of Slavic ritual for some foreign, absolutely. And we have some Lithuanian, the offering of Keistut, who did pagan offerings, swearing oaths to Ludovic, Hungarian king, and the next night he disappeared simply. It was obviously a kind of performance, quite funny thing. And some of those elements, this performance of pagan priest or stupid pagan peasant, well, invented by monks or not, but it is description of performance. And all that funny story with the shield and this Dietrich, first perfect story, and it's a performative element. It's I think, quite important motif you touch. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.